Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well and welcome to the next instalment in Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council's Enterprise Week. I'm Kevin Kelly from Podium, and once again my job today is to put your questions and my own to our two outstanding speakers. So to submit a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and don't forget to include your name and organisation before your question so that we can give you a little bit of profile as well. We would also encourage you to tweet about today's event. The hashtag and relevant Twitter handles are hashtag ABCEW20. That's hashtag ABC for Armagh, Banbridge, Craigavon, EW for Enterprise Week 2020. And the handles are at ABCB_council, at Jerry Hussey, at Lizzie with an IE, Colvin, COLVIN1, and at Fibrous Full Fibre. Now, I have my high-tech show notes facility behind me, and Podium will tweet my takeaways for what they're worth after the session, so stay tuned for that. At the end of the event, you will also be asked to complete the attendee evaluation survey, and we would be most grateful if you would take 2 minutes to give us your feedback. This is crucial for us and for the council so that we can create the right events, the right initiatives for you in the future. Now, as I've said all week, streaming live brings some degree of uncontrollables, be that with the internet at large, the internet at our end, the internet at your end, and everything has gone perfectly well so far this week, which is a recipe for disaster. Me saying that, but we've tested and rehearsed today and it's all gone very smoothly. But I just want to reassure you that in the event of any technical difficulties, we will give you all access to a full replay, and only those who have registered access to that full replay. So you won't miss out should there be any technical issues. Now, Enterprise Week 2020 has been organised by Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council and sponsored by Fibrous Broadband. The week is being delivered by local enterprise agencies including Mayfair Business Centre, Armagh Business Centre, Sido, Brownlow Limited, and a special thanks go to Kieran Cunningham and his team at Banbridge District Enterprise for all of their work on this project. These organisations have come together to organise a superb suite of events in Enterprise Week. And just by way of reminder, it was former fighter pilot Mandy Hickson who spoke about resilience and adaptability on Monday. Superb session. We then had two of our own most decorated business leaders in Fergal McCormick and Dave Linton share their experiences and insights on vision and traction on Wednesday. And for me, I think it's fitting that we wrap the week up, particularly with the announcements on heightened restrictions from last night, that we wrap the week up with the topics of well-being and winning. You know, in order to win, we need to be competitive. In order to be competitive, we need to be well. So I think this event is of its time, and I'm really looking forward to it. So to formally open the session, I'm delighted to hand over to the Lord Mayor of Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council. Over to you, Lord Mayor.
Good afternoon. Businesses continue to feel the strain of navigating through these uncertain times, so we wanted to bring Enterprise Week to a close with a focus on the topic of well-being. I'm delighted that we have Jerry Hussey with us today, who's a health and performance coach. Jerry will share how we can look after our physical and emotional well-being to ensure that we rise and thrive during these unprecedented times. We will also hear from Lizzie Colvin, who will share stories from her incredible journey with the Irish international hockey team. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and well done again to ABC Council and its partners for their vision in pulling this week-long initiative together. Now, we're about to hear from two people who have excelled in the worlds of both sport and business. And first up is Jerry Hussey, who as a performance consultant, has coached elite athletes for Olympic Games, Heineken Cups, All Ireland finals, World Cups, and golf majors. I've had the pleasure of working with them on several very memorable projects. So Jerry, it's great to see you again, and the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin, and hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. As Kevin said, I've been blessed over the years to work with a number of high performers in the world of sport and business. And I want to share some very simple and practical insights into what winning looks like. And I suppose start off by even the word win, W-I-N, is a focus on what's important now. And I think when each and every one of us, sometimes we have to let go of the past or the future, and we have to ask ourselves that simple question: what's singly the most important thing now? And that applies to maybe this day, this week, or maybe this moment in a game. So when we start to ask about what's important now, then we start to be able to prioritize in a much better way. Over the years, I've been blessed to work with different athletes and different sports. And I've also got to lead and manage people over 2-3 Olympic Games cycle. So for me, you start off coaching a 16-year-old kid who is single and carefree and has this dream of being an Olympic champion. And by the time they've gone through the third Olympic game, now they're a 28-year-old dad. And for me, that's really important, that you not just get to coach the athlete, but you get to coach the human being. And that's far more exciting. Sometimes we see the world of sport and we see people in World Cups or Olympic Games and we think it's lovely and it's glamorous. But for me, the breakthrough moments, the great insights and the great memories are at a training camp someday when something happens and maybe the athlete gets injured, or maybe they're dropped from funding, or maybe they're at a competition and they don't qualify. And it's the ups and downs and the highs and lows. And sometimes, you're faced with all adversity. And I think in some ways, high performance sport is that it's chaos in motion, or it is adversity in itself. So you have these dreams and you have these ambitions, but there's a number of things that have to happen in order for you to achieve that. So I'm going to help us navigate today. How do we create a mindset that's a little bit more ordered, or a little bit more focused, and a bit more energized? Before I go further, I want to say a little bit about myself, because you might be saying, well, who the hell is this guy and what does he do? Over the years, I suppose the most important thing for me is I grew up in a family with 10 of us in the family, 8 kids, mom and dad, in a tiny little house. And anyone here that has come from a large family or is part of a large family, when we were growing up, the house was always in a bit of chaos. There was always noise and always people moving around. And my mother was always trying to do a good job, but she raised us almost like free-range chickens. So she would get us up in the morning, get us dressed, feed us breakfast, and then say, right, out you go. And we'd go out somewhere, out to the country, or out to school or somewhere. And then we had this inbuilt mechanism where we'd roughly know when dinner time was. And we'd all find ourselves back in the house again, and we'd eat, and then we'd go again. So at that time, my mum and dad's role was keeping us all safe, keeping us fed, keeping clothes on us, keeping us washed when we could, and going out there. So I always had that kind of a spirit of adventure, a spirit of going out into the back garden and making a tree house, going into the tree. And I was lucky enough to be raised in the countryside where we had that adventure available to us. We didn't have any high-tech toys or any technology toys because my parents couldn't afford it. So a cardboard box had to become your racing car. An old pallet board had to become your tree house. But it created a sense of creativity and adventure. So I'm blessed to have that. But I was also a problem or a nightmare child, because in a family of 8, what you want is kind of everybody to fall into line and follow the rules and follow. And I was never like that. Not that I was a disruptive kid, or I wasn't, but I was a very curious kid. And I used to wreck my mother's head with questions. So questions like, why do we die? And my poor mother, trying to get the shopping in, trying to get the house clean, would be trying to explain why people die. And then I said, well, why are we born? And then one particular time I asked her, how does the tide, I heard on some TV show that the tide moves in and out, and you can predict the time. And I was trying to think, how does the sea know what time it is? How does it know how to come in and out? How can it be so predictable and so exact? So I asked my mother, what moves the tide? And of course, my mother gives the answer that most of us would give. The moon moves the tide. And then I asked her, how? And my mother, like most of us, came to a blank. I never really thought of that. So a few days later, she was in the local shop and she met the local science teacher and she asked him straight out, can you tell me how the hell the moon moves the tide? Because I have a young guy at home, he's wrecking my head. So he said, well, he moves it by this thing called electric field, or he said, it's like gravity. It's an electric field. So my mother kind of got the basics and came home and she was all delighted. She said, you know that thing you're asking me? What happens is the moon has a gravity, the earth has a gravity, and they connect together, so they keeps each other stuck. And then there's this thing in space called a field. It's an electrical field, and that's moving everything. And I said, and what moves and who made the electrical field? And my mother said, what did you mean? Well, I said, nothing can make itself. What made the electrical field? Now, my mother at that stage, either because she was about to do her head in, she found someone that I could go with and chat. Now, nowadays you call them a coach, but it was just a guy that I could go and chat and ask these questions. I was gifted with two things from my parents: a sense of adventure, a sense that there's a big world out there. You don't need complex toys. You don't need technology. Open your eyes and you'll find there's mystery everywhere. There's adventure everywhere. And the second thing I was always encouraged was to ask questions. To this day, I absolutely believe that every single human being is one question away from a major breakthrough. And I've been lucky enough to work with corporate companies who have shifted their whole identity, shifted their business in an instant because we asked the right question. We live in a world where everybody's so busy all the time, and yet I think we're so distracted. And in that constant state of doing, in that constant state of rushing, racing, we're so busy that we don't have the clarity to ask the right question. So the one thing I want you to remember today is every single human being is one question away from a major breakthrough. And sometimes in a pressure situation, what you need is to stop and ask yourself the right question. Today, I'm just going to take you through some of the questions I've asked over the years about the mind, about the body, and about the spirit, and about how people ignite something inside themselves that make them resilient, make them focused, and make them rise and thrive in even the most challenging times. So I really started to ask those questions. But also, my mum would say that when we went shopping, I was also a nightmare because my mother would be walking around the store and she'd be trying to get the groceries done with 6 or 7 kids hanging off her. And she'd warn us all, whatever you do, don't go missing. Whatever you do, stay exactly as beside this buggy, don't go missing. She'd turn around for about 2.5 seconds, put something in the buggy, in the trolley, look back, and there Jerry was gone. And I was always gone. That sense of adventure. I always wanted to know what was behind the shelf, what was under the shelf. So you can imagine the nightmare it was. But my mother would say that the same scenario unfolded in 9 out of 10 times. Eventually, she would find me either in the shop or outside the shop or somewhere. But I would be with a stranger. And the stranger would be crying. And my mother would be very embarrassed because she'd think, oh, he's after upsetting the person he's after. And my mother would come up in a tizzy and she'd start apologizing. But the stranger would say, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And my mother would say, well, I'm very sorry if you upset you. And they'd say, no, he didn't upset me. So my mother would kind of be looking at the stranger in a public place in tears. So my mother would ask, what did he ask? What did he say to you? And the stranger would say, he came up and asked me why I was sad. Whether it's a gift or a curse, I'm not interested in the clothes people wear. I'm not interested in the cars they drive. I'm not interested in the medals they have or don't have. I'm interested in what I see when I look at somebody. And when you actually take time to look at somebody, you see something. When you look at an elite athlete and they're in full flow, or you look at a musician and they're in full flow, or an actor, and you can look into their eyes and you see magic and creativity and imagination, and it's almost like they have this gift and it's just flowing through them. And then you look at other people, and when you actually take time to notice, you see sadness, you see anger, you see someone that's lost. And for me, whether it's right or wrong, I find it very hard to see somebody who is not in a good place and not ask the simple question, So in all of the questions I've asked in my life, how is quantum physics connected with neuroscience? How does a gut brain axis develop? The single most important question that we should never be afraid to ask is, are you okay? And in order to ask other people those questions, we have to become comfortable, first and foremost, asking ourselves questions. And some of the hardest questions we'll ask are, is there enough happiness in my life? Is there enough fun in my life? How do I speak to myself? And when I look in the mirror, am I proud of the person I see? Now, you might say, from a strictly performance, a strictly science, how the hell does this link with high performance? Well, I'm going to explain. When I started working with Irish boxers in 2004, we had a boxing team that had success, but it was inconsistent, and we had gone roughly 20 years with very little success. We had to change. We had to make the Irish boxing team from one of the worst boxing teams to one of the best boxing teams. But we didn't have any money. We couldn't change facility. We couldn't change the technology. We couldn't change the boxers. We could change nothing physical. But the one thing we could change was the non-physical, which was mindset. So we started asking, when it comes down to it, being able to perform on the biggest stage, being able to not be distracted, being able to think clearly under pressure, being able to believe inside yourself. When it comes to the big day, what level, what percentage comes down to your mental strength? And it varies. People say it's 50%, 80%, and some people say on the big day, in that moment, to take that winning kick, to score that winning penalty, is 80 to 90% mental. So then I started to ask questions. I started to look at the Irish boxers and say, in all the hours you train, and they were training 60, 70 hours a week, how many of those hours are training the mind? If you say that mental skills is at least equal to 50% of your performance, is 50% of your time down to training your mind, training your brain? And of course, the answer was no. They had nutritionists, speed coaches, strength coaches, everybody working on the physical. And I was lucky enough that they took me in and they allowed me to start thinking about the physical, the non-physical. So we started to look at what the brain is. It's a very simple question, and yet when you ask most people what the brain is, either they don't know or they have the wrong idea. We think sometimes that the brain is a concrete block. And what I mean by that is people say to me, oh, well, I'm no good at maths. I'm not very confident. Well, change it. Your brain is not a concrete block. The brain you're born with and the brain you die with is not the same brain. The scientific fact is that every single cell in your body is regenerating all the time. If something happened to you 3 years ago, there's not a single cell in your body right now that existed when that happened. We used to think that the brain did not have the ability to regenerate itself until we discovered a substance called BDNF. And BDNF triggers a system or a process called neurogenesis, and we know now that the brain regenerates itself all the time. Neuroscience has shown us that the brain is a mix of three things. It has physical matter, it has chemical, and it has electricity. What we know is the physical matter of the brain is actually responding to the electricity, which is phenomenal. So when we understand what the brain is, we now know that the brain is this living, breathing organism that is responding to your thoughts, to your emotions, and what you focus on. And if we had a brain imaging machine, depending on what you're thinking about, depending on the words you're using, depending on what the emotion you're experiencing, we will see different parts of the brain light up. And the reason we say light up is because they literally light up. They get a surge of biochemical, they get a surge of electricity, they get a surge of blood, and that part of the brain lights up. We can see it from brain imaging. And we have the ability, based on what we choose to focus on, based on the words we use, to shut down certain areas of the brain and open other parts of the brain. At the front of the brain, we have a thing called the prefrontal cortex. And in the prefrontal cortex is our ability to think clearly under pressure, to ask good questions, to extend and expand spatial awareness and depth perception. But if we are in a threat state, if we are in a fear-based, the brain instantly shuts down the prefrontal cortex and it ignites the amygdala, which is your limbic brain, and now you're stuck in unconscious programs. And once the prefrontal cortex shuts down, you can't actually take in new information. You can't retain information. And you can't think differently than you thought in the past. You are trapped into a limited toolbox of old answers. And sometimes people are trying to create a new pathway, trying to rebuild a new business. They're trying to be creative, but they're in the limbic state of the brain. So I started to teach very simply the boxers about the brain was and how the words they use, the things they focused on, was actively changing their brain. Now that we knew that we could actually build the physical structure of the brain, we started to put in brain training exercises around visualization, meditation. Meditation and visualization now seem to be popping up everywhere, but when I started to tell the boxers about these nearly 20 years ago, people were laughing at me. So when we start looking at how we can shape the brain, we need to realize how it's connected with the whole body. We live with this illusion that the brain, the gut, the heart, and the heart are in some way linked. They're not linked, they are one system. So your brain and your gut are connected by a vagal system, a vagal nerve, which is called the gut-brain axis. Everything you eat affects your brain. If you're eating a lot of caffeine, processed foods, high sugar, it triggers anxiety. If you're eating a lot of processed food or sugars, it spikes the adrenal receptors, and the adrenal receptors, when they spike, trigger the brain to release cortisol and adrenaline, which make us feel more anxious. When I started looking at the food the boxers were eating, I was realizing because it's a weight category sport, they were eating tiny amounts of food, but food that gives them big bursts of energy. But what's happening now is their concentration was dipping up and down. Their mood was dipping up and down. So we started to look at different things. The simple advice I'd give you this morning is we should start every morning with hot water and lemon. Why would you do that? Because it ignites the digestive enzymes of the gut. We should eat more greens, less caffeine, less sugars. And when we do, we increase the gut diversity. Now the gut and the gut-brain axis begin to communicate with each other in a whole new way. The second thing we need to be aware of is the words we use. Every single word you know is linked to an emotion. So when we use the words like crisis, danger, deadline, we instantly trigger in the brain to release a stress chemical. It's either adrenaline, noradrenaline, or cortisol. And that quickly floods down the central nervous system, and that fires the central nervous system, and the whole central nervous system lights up, and we can see this. And in a short term, for a short-term goal, a short-term sprint, or to deal with a short-term project, that's actually okay. There's nothing wrong with cortisol and adrenaline in tiny amounts because it activates us, it ignites us, it allows us to do something special. But what we know is a long-term drip of cortisol creates incredible damage in the gut, and it never allows the brain to switch off. And when your brain is switched on in the limbic brain and the prefrontal cortex is shut down, not only do you not want to focus on one thing at one time, you find it hard to focus. No matter what you're looking at, you find it very hard to focus. And then the environment, the noise, the news, everything is coming down. And when we're in that always on, that overactivated central nervous system, your body believes then that there is some type of threat in the world. There is some type of imminent threat that's about to get you. So your brain, being a threat detection system, is constantly scanning the world looking for where the threat is. So you find yourself looking in Instagram, looking on the news, looking in your emails. You find it hard to sit still because your brain is saying, why am I flooded with all these chemicals? You need to find out where the threat is. The biggest gift we give the boxers was teaching them how to rebalance their central nervous system. It sounds complicated, and there's two simple ways of doing it. The one is your breath. Now, even when I heard this first, I started laughing because I was an athlete for years and I used to think that I was breathing perfectly. And until the coach said, take a deep breath, and Jerry went like this. And your man nearly fell off the chair laughing and said, what the hell are you lifting your shoulders for? I didn't know. I never asked the question, am I breathing correctly? So here's some simple facts. The human lungs have a capacity of 10 to 11 liters. And yet when I test my athletes, I get them to wear masks and we watch their oxygen usage. Most adults in the corporate world are, despite having a lung capacity of 10 to 11 liters, are using a half a liter because we're breathing from top up. We should be breathing 6 to 8 breaths a minute, but we're breathing up on 20. And what that is, there's two types of breathing. There's optimal state breathing and there's threat state breathing. And when we're in that threat state breathing, we're constantly firing all these chemicals of stress. We find it hard to relax. Our central nervous system is lighting up. And the whole world seems to be going quicker and quicker. 5 deep breaths, where we actually breathe from our belly. And if anyone has a little baby at home, I have a little man now, it's just 6 months old. And when you see the baby breathing, when they breathe in, their belly comes out. And when they breathe in, their belly falls. So when they breathe in, their belly expands. A very simple way to know which state of breathing you're in right now is put your hand on your belly, take a deep breath. And if your belly goes in, if that's the way you've been trained to breathe, you're in threat state breathing. You're breathing backwards, which is, it's mind blowing for most people. But we know that scientifically 5 deep breaths will switch you from sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, to parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest digest. The first thing we did is we trained the boxers to breathe better. And if anyone watches on any of the videos we had, particularly in the London or Beijing Olympics, the boxers would walk back to the corner and we only had 60 seconds in that corner to give information, to advise the boxer. And yet Billy Walsh was always happy to sacrifice 20 of those seconds. He would put his hand on the boxer's heart, he would look into their eyes, and the two of them would take 10 deep breaths. The boxer's heart rate would drop, the prefrontal cortex was open, cortisol would drop out of their system, and now they're in that moment. And in that moment, they could take on new information, they could think about the fight, they could ask what's important now. The second thing we can do is meditation. And I know meditation is popping up now everywhere, but a little bit of science around meditation is very simple. Your brain works on energy waves. So we have 4 major waves. Beta is stress state, and we have delta, alpha, and theta. And it's very simple. We can do a brain scan and we know what wave pattern people are on. High performers can't be on beta. And yet most people in the office, most people running around thinking they're high performers are in a high beta. Meditation does 2 simple things. It extends the wave pattern of your brain, because remember, your brain is electricity. So it slows the brain down. And then what we do know is different parts of the brain can actually work on a different brain pattern. So when we start to meditate, when we start to breathe, we bring our mind together. And now what happens is the brain not only starts to slow the patterns down, but because we've mirror neurons in the brain, then they start to sync together. And we achieve a state of coherence. What made the Irish boxers so successful? They could slow everything down. They were present in one moment at one time. And when you slow your inner world down, everything slows down. All the Irish boxers went from these rugged, tough fighters to these calm guys that could stand in front of the opponent and become counterpunchers. It became easy. In this world, we know that everything we do in the moment, the amount of cortisol and adrenaline that we experience, if it's too much, will have a detrimental impact on our health and well-being. The biggest reason I do this is that too long people came to me only when their health broke down and they didn't figure out what was happening. The way you live your life in the moment, the way you live your life right now, is having a massive impact on your future. And when we think of the word disease, we always think it's something physical. But remember, your body is physical, chemical, and electrical. Dis-ease, listen to the word, dis-ease is lack of ease. And if we live with a lack of ease in the mind, if we live with a lack of ease in the spirit, we tend to get a physical disease. The last thing I'll say, because I know, Kevin, we're nearly out of time. The last thing I want to say is that I noticed how many athletes went to the Olympic Games and got sick, they got colds, they got flus, they got viruses. And nobody could understand why. And they just put it down to bad luck, they put it down to bacteria, they put it down to time zones, they put it down to all types of nonsense. It was a compromised immune system. It was simple things that they weren't doing. They weren't meditating. They weren't breathing. They weren't switching off. They weren't rebalancing their central nervous system. And that constant on was eating, depleting their immune system. Everybody said to me, it's just bad luck. It's just what happens. I'm lucky enough to have brought over 25 athletes to 3 different Olympic Games, and not one of them has ever got a cold or a virus. Your health is in your hands. You have far more control on what's going on inside of you. And now the science is showing that your central nervous system and your brain isn't actually responding to what's going on in the outside world. It's responding to what's going on inside of you. What's happening outside of you is uncontrollable. But if you focus on what is controllable, your breath, your thoughts, your words, now you have the ability to shift your central nervous system. But deep down, we know this. Anybody that has ever suffered from anxiety or depression knows that you might be in the calmest environment in the world, but still suffer from anxiety because your central nervous system is activated. You might be in the happiest environment on the planet, but you still feel sad. We know that our physiological being, we know that our biochemical reality is not responding to the outside world. If it is, then all you'd have to do for somebody with anxiety is take them to a place where there's nothing anxious in the physical world and they would stop being anxious. We know that's not true. It is your inner world, it is your thoughts, your emotions, and what you choose to focus on that's what's creating your inner being. And when you can start to rebalance the central nervous system, understand how the brain works, when you can begin to slow down, now you become present. And now you have the ability to ask better questions. This last question everybody should ask is, do you know your average life expectancy is 900 months and you sleep 300? Do you realize that of that 300, at my age, I have 300 left? I need to ask my questions every day. What do I actually want in life? What am I giving my energy to? What are the emotions that I'm allowing myself to hold on to? And are they doing me good? Are they opening my mind? Or are they trapping me in the past? Are they causing me inner stress? Are they causing me disease? And if I don't stop, if I don't change, if I continue to live with this always on, this diseased state of being, distracted state of being, what does that look like in my future? And is that a future that makes you happy? Thank you for listening. I hope today, if nothing else, it whets your appetite to understand the power that you have within, the power that you have to manage your brain, your central nervous system, and your gut. And when you start to work in simple ways every day with simple processes that bring the brain into coherence, that balance that central nervous system and ignite that connection between the brain and the gut, you will be amazed at the level of clarity and confidence and insight that you begin to see. And when you change how you are on the inside, the world changes on the outside. I hope that whets your appetite. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm happy to be. If there's any questions at all, I know Kevin's going to ask us questions later. So thank you for that. I'm sorry I've gone a bit over there, Kevin.
Thanks, Jerry. That was a really impactful presentation. The 900 months model, the 300 months within that really provides perspective. I always thought I was a good breather as well, but turns out I'm not. There are plenty of notes on the whiteboard. We'll tweet those out later, and Jerry will be back for the Q&A at the end. So please do submit your questions using the button below, and I will put them to both of our speakers. So next up, we're going to hear from a native of County Armagh, one of your own. Lizzie Colvin is an employment law solicitor with DWF, and as such is very well versed in the challenges that businesses and employees are facing during the COVID-19 crisis. Outside of business, Lizzie has been a key player in the incredible journey of the Irish women's hockey team, which has captured the attention and the imagination of the island over the past few years. I let her share the story and the lessons, but before Lizzie takes to the virtual stage, we're going to play a very short video courtesy of Nigel Ringdon at the BBC to remind us all of some of the key moments within that journey. So play the video, please.
Thanks very much, Kevin, and thanks to everyone today for joining the webinar. I hope you all enjoyed watching that video. I have to admit, it always makes my stomach turn looking back at the shootouts for the Olympic qualifiers. It certainly was a very big suspense that night, and I'm glad we just came out the right side of it. I have to say, looking back, I can't believe that was more than a year ago since we qualified for our first Olympics, and it brings back even more special memories from that period of time in my life, because the day after we qualified, I was actually flying out to South Africa for my wedding the week after. I know you all may say I'm absolutely bonkers to have had my wedding so close to the qualifiers. It was completely outside my control. And I promised my husband, no matter what the outcome, I was going to be smiling, blushing bride coming down that aisle. All I'll say is I'm delighted that we managed to qualify the week before, and thankfully we celebrated our first anniversary a couple of weeks ago. So just for the next 10-15 minutes, I am just going to give you a brief insight into what the team has been getting up to over the last few months once we realized that Tokyo was going to be postponed for a year. I'm also going to touch on my personal experience over the last few months and how that's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, and the tools that us as a team and myself over the last few weeks have been trying to implement in order not to just survive the new normal and these lockdown times, but also to thrive in this changing environment. So if I just share my screen here, just bear with me. So hopefully that worked. So in terms of initial reactions to the lockdown and what happened when we found out Tokyo 2020 was going to turn into 2021, obviously there was huge disappointment in the team. We have a wide range of ages, so some players, this was going to be potentially their first major tournament. For some of us older ones, it may have been the pinnacle of our careers, so the thought of having to train for another 18 months was incredibly challenging, and there certainly was a grieving period in the first few weeks once that news was told to us. But after the dust settled, we scheduled Zoom meetings to connect with each other over the following weeks, and one of the things that we really wanted to discuss was how we could get through this lockdown and come out the other side ready for Tokyo 2021. And we all knew that the team that was able to adjust the best was going to be successful. The ironic thing is that when hockey was suspended. There was no matches to be played. It actually looked a lot like our preparation back in the old days when we had very little funding, and we would have had maybe 1 or 2 weeks preparation in advance of a tournament. So we felt that we were well versed in these sorts of scenarios. We've also been through a number of sticky situations in the past, a number of tournaments, and actually just before the Olympic qualifiers last November, the whole team ended up getting food poisoning. I won't say which restaurant it was at, but the next day we were scheduled to actually do a hike up the Mournes as a team building exercise. So let's just say that that was one interesting hike with a lot of loo roll packed in the bags. We also, on the way to play in Germany the week before the qualifier, our bus broke down. There was smoke everywhere on the autobahn, and we had to do our team talk, get dressed and ready to run onto the pitch as soon as we arrived, because we had the time pressure of catching a flight home that evening. So we are used to sticky situations. We're used to unexpected events, and as with all Northern Irish and Irish people, we always address that with a little bit of humour as well. So we did feel that we could get through this, and one of the things that we really wanted to focus on is how we could keep that special something that keeps our team ticking over, to keep us working well together. And our team culture is something that we are known for. At the World Cup, everyone said to us, that's what we saw. We saw your togetherness, we saw your unity, and we knew that was something that COVID was going to get in the way of, and we needed to find out a way of making that work. So as you can see from my screen there, I've just shown a picture of the Zoom quizzes. I'm sure a lot of you out there did a few Zoom quizzes in your days. And this was one that involved a treasure hunt where you had to get a number of items, including a makeshift mask and a hat. We also encouraged each other to post videos of our individual training sessions. There's me working out with my husband and my little puppy, despite the distractions. And then also, let's move on to the next one. We also thought it was really important that there was a lot of new players that came in that obviously would have come in after the Olympic cycle, and it's very difficult to have those natural conversations, to get to know them, to go on trips and have fun and just ease your way into the squad. And that was very challenging, and that was something that was addressed a couple of months down the line, that feeling of disconnect for the new players. So as you'll see there, we had bejeweled face masks, a bit like badges, that basically were handed out to everyone in the team, and we were all designated roles and responsibilities. So mine is part of the recovery police team, so we're in charge of making sure that everyone does a proper cool down and follows the recovery protocols. And I think that was just a really good way of making everyone feel involved, making everyone feel like they had something to contribute, and also to have other people's voices heard, not just the coaches or the leadership team. And that seems to have worked really well for us. It is still challenging, and obviously we won't be having any matches this side of Christmas, but I think that the team certainly is in a very good place at the moment, and spirits are high. So in terms of 3 quick tools that I would say has helped us in the last number of months, and could relate to you in your business or in your teams of work. First of all, try and identify that special ingredient which makes your business or team successful, whether that is team culture, working from home, or if it's a system or operation that makes your business work. Find out what that is. And secondly, try and adapt and find creative ways in order to sustain that. For us, it's about connecting virtually, or making sure that we can have fun, even if that is on a virtual platform. And finally, and most importantly, is you have to keep it fresh. Like, let's be honest, the Zoom quizzes kind of went a bit stale after the third or fourth week, when you felt you kind of ended up not coming up with good creative quiz questions. And you have to keep it fresh, and you have to work hard and evolve and keep it entertaining. For us at the moment, we're currently in memory of Great British Bake Off, we have a baking competition and cooking competition every week. So that is allowing people to flourish in their skills. This week we had a picture of an egg on jam and toast. So that's really the extent of some of our players' cooking skills. But it has been incredibly successful for us over the last few months. In terms of my personal goals, I have to be honest that it has been a real roller coaster the last few months. We were meant to go to South Africa just at the start of April, when things really did start to shut down, and I had taken a career break from my role. That career break lasted a week and a half before I had to go back to my boss to ask if he would take me back in my job, and thankfully he did. And as Kevin mentioned, I work in employment law, so that has been incredibly busy and challenging over the last few months, and I've been really grateful that I could get stuck into that work and really work through some very innovative and challenging developments in law. So I'm certainly a person of action, and while I consider myself to be quite passionate and wear my heart on my sleeve, like most Northern Irish people, I do like to tick the box, and I was very good at switching off the emotional switch when it came to the Olympics, and that shift in all my life plans. And I had my work life together. I had the luxury of having more time to spend with my friends and my family. I had more hobbies. I did bake banana bread at least 5 or 6 times. I was one of those people that waited 8 weeks with Decathlon to order that bike that has been sitting in my shed for the last 4 months. So I had every facet of my life together, and I was ticking the box in that, and I felt like I had everything together, and I was doing everything right to get through COVID. But I was surviving, I wasn't thriving. And there was one thing, and Jerry, as he so perfectly put it, is that I wasn't taking care of my mental well-being. And I certainly had a wake-up call in the last 2.5 months there. I had a bit of a bump in the road, and basically we went back into a very heavy training block from September, and we had been required to train and gym in order to get our bodies ready for that. And 3 weeks into the training, I ended up tearing my hamstring. I stretched out for a ball, full sprint, and tore it, and the pain shot the whole out my leg, and it was very sore. But I've torn my hamstring a couple of times. I've had injuries, but for some reason this injury just really got me down, and it was really, really tough to take. And I don't think I've been that down with an injury for a very long time. And the weird thing was, I had no pressure on me. Club hockey was suspended. Irish hockey, there was no matches coming up, and I had no pressure. I had all the time in the world to rehab, and everyone kept saying to me, this is the best time in order to get injured. But I was so upset and so down, and the honest truth is that I knew deep down in my heart that I hadn't got myself in the best condition I could be in order to be ready for training. And really, it was a follow-on from when we got the announcement that the Olympics had been postponed. I had just got all my ducks in a row, and I had done everything that I thought I needed to do from an action point of view. But what I hadn't done was I hadn't dealt mentally with the disappointment of the Olympics being moved. an 18 months down the line and having to train through another winter in order to be ready to be selected and get to the Olympics. And it was really, really tough. And I suppose I came to a crossroads, and essentially I had two options. I could either moan about it, be negative, do the rehab, probably a half-arsed approach, get back to training, probably put myself at more risk of getting injured again, or even worse, completely ruling myself out for selection and ending up not going to the Olympics, which has been the pinnacle goal of my career that I've worked for 11 years of my life. Or else I could accept this has happened. I first of all could accept the Olympics is happening in 12 months' time. You have injured yourself, and accept that that's something that I can no longer control. That's in the past. But what I can control is my attitude and my approach to the rehab, to being diligent, to putting myself in the best position that I can be ready to go again and to get selected and go to the Olympics. And, I have to be honest, I did moan for 2 or 3 days at least. My husband heard the brunt of it, but having talked through that and realized that these were the mental struggles that I had, really helped me work through that. And after a couple of days, I decided, look, I need to do everything possible in order to get myself in the best position, because I don't want to have any regrets at the end of this. And I'm really glad that happened. It seems a bit strange that I'm saying I'm glad that I got injured, but I am genuinely really glad, because that wake-up call has reminded me how much I love what I do and how much I love hockey and how I can't live with regrets. So for the last 8 weeks, for the first half, I wasn't allowed to train with the rest of the team, so I was training in isolation, and that was quite a daunting experience, having to train on my own and rehab my own and not being able to see anyone when they were all traveling down in Dublin. So what really helped me to get through the mammoth task of getting back from a hamstring injury, which has the worst rehab program possible, is that I set myself mini goals. At each stage, I would test myself, and I would set certain goals that I had to achieve. There were setbacks, but that really, really helped me. And if I show you there's me training on my own. It's a screenshot of my Instagram down at Harlequins training when everyone else was playing in Dublin. And, it was quite nice, I have to say, to track my progress and essentially blog my rehab. And the messages of support from my teammates were just incredible. And it really helped me to stay connected and to stay on course with my rehab. And then if I show you the next video, this is just a very brief video of a very simple skill that we train all the time. It is one of our bread and butter basic warm-up skills, but I couldn't do that about 6 weeks ago. And I was just so elated, so over the moon that I was able to just turn and receive the ball, and I just felt on cloud 9. And I think that has helped me get over my issues with those mental barriers that I had been facing about 10 weeks prior to that. So in terms of lessons that I have learned really over the last 8 weeks, I would say that in order to not just survive lockdown, or for me to just survive the training and get to the Olympics, first of all, I had to accept what I could and couldn't control. And I certainly couldn't control when the Olympics was happening. I certainly can't control COVID restrictions on when we play again, and also the injury that I had. But what I could control is my mental approach and my attitude going forward to get myself in the best position. The second thing which really helped, and which I've already mentioned, is to set many goals. For me, looking at the mammoth task that is 8 weeks down the line is just not something that I'm very good at entertaining. So to have those mini goals and the ability to track your progress can really help you to stay on course and to stay on task, and see how far you've come over the last few months. And the last one, as I've just alluded to there with my video, is that it's really important to celebrate those mini wins, because you work so hard to get back. If you have a certain objective you want to achieve, then it is important to reflect on those and to see the amazing results that you can have. So I hope that's a nice insight into what it's been like for the last 6 or 7 months as me as an athlete. I just want to share a quick quote that I found the other day when I was researching for this, and I just feel like this really captures what I'm trying to get across today. Life doesn't come with a remote, so get up and change it for yourself. So I hope that was insightful, and hopefully there's some takeaway points that you can relate to in your business or in your working life. And welcome any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Guys, Lizzie, superb. Jerry, superb. Just fascinating to see a real-time, real-life Olympic standard application of the exact things that Jerry has been talking about. So much appreciated, guys. And the questions are flowing in here, so I'm going to get straight to them, and we'll get through as many as we can. I'm going to put this first one to both of you. It comes from Jared, and Jared asks, do you think that, and I think this is born out of Jerry's curiosity questions, do you think that technology, rather than opening young people's minds, actually blunts our intellectual and research skills as we look for quick replies from Google offering short sound bites lacking in substance? And I'm interested in both of your responses to technology and young people in general and its implications. Jerry, we'll maybe go to you first on that one.
I would say first and foremost, technology is almost like everything in the world. It's like a car. A car can be the most life-giving, it can be the greatest thing to own, and can also be dangerous. The car itself is not dangerous, it's how you use it. And I think it's the same with technology. I mean, technology now has allowed me to stay in contact with my parents over the last couple of months. It has allowed them to see their little grandson. So technology isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I also agree that the way we use technology now, we want Google to do our thinking for us. And I think that's because we want instant gratification. I think the biggest thing we can teach our kids is, like Lizzie spoke about, the real good stuff is inside of you. It's not in Google. And the really good stuff has to be worked towards. We grew up, like if you imagine in the womb, nobody had to tell you to develop. When you were born, nobody had to tell you to walk or how to learn language, because we have this natural inbuilt instinct that is connected to something that allows us to grow, to develop physiologically, chemically. It allows us to explore the world. And what happens then is we switch off, and we switch off from that. So we disconnect from our own inner intelligence, our own inner wisdom. And then we end up with a place where somebody has to tell us what to eat. Somebody has to tell us it's now time to move. I mean, if you look at the Fitbit industry, it's treating people no more than those Tamagotchis that one time ago you had to keep alive. It tells you when to move, it tells you what to eat, and it tells you you need 10,000 steps a day. Now, I'd love to know what's the science behind 10,000 steps. You should know in yourself, have you moved enough today? Have you laughed enough yourself today? But the problem is we need to start at an educational level where the teacher does not say to kids, sit down there, look at page 2, paragraph 6, and I'll tell you what the answer is. We need to adapt a model of education where the teacher facilitates self-led learning, direction that is coming from inside. So I think we need, particularly as parents, we need to try engender in each of our children a natural curiosity about the world. Teach them the skill of asking good questions. Teach them patience, and teach them that actually nobody knows them better than they do themselves. And all the information you need for most of the important stuff is actually inside if you're willing to reconnect. But the parents have to teach children how to reconnect with their inner self. Come off the screens, get away from the phone, throw away the Fitbit, and ask yourself and listen to yourself, because you have that incredible inner wisdom inside when you dare to listen to it.
Lizzie, anything to add to that question?
I totally agree with Jerry. I think there has to be a balance, and certainly during lockdown and at the start when us as a group couldn't meet personally, using virtual technology has been amazing, but we've really pushed as a team to try and build those relationships and those connections, and we have certain rules as well, like you can't use your phones at meal times. If you touch your phone, you have a forfeit. We have all these things in place to really encourage all of our teammates to really just spend time together and build those relationships, and also when it comes to challenging each other when we're reviewing hockey videos and skills and tactics. It's not about just sitting behind your phone or sitting behind your iPad and Googling it. It's about having an opinion and expressing yourself. So I certainly think there's a balance, and there's benefits to technology, but I think it is important to come back to the good old-fashioned stuff, just sitting and having conversations with each other and getting to know each other. Yeah.
Great. Alison Moore made a comment here in the Q&A. She's fascinated about the connection between the mindset and the injury, and it's prompted a question around gratitude. And I suppose it's easier to have gratitude or perspective in the aftermath of the likes of an injury.
Mm-hmm.
And how could we encourage gratitude within ourselves before something like the injury happens? Jerry, again, maybe we'll go to you first.
I think it's like everything else, like Lizzie talked about there, developing skills. You have to develop the skill of gratitude. So you have to create a time and space every day where you take time to notice, to be aware, and to express gratitude. And that might be the gratitude for having a warm shower, the gratitude for having a cup of tea, the gratitude of having someone in your life that loves you, the gratitude of being able to breathe fresh air, the gratitude of being able to see with your eyes, hear with your ears. It's as simple as that, Kevin. But you have to create the habit of it. And, what gets measured gets improved. So we have to start to improve by measuring how many times a day do I actually stop to give gratitude. And for me, because I am religious, but it's not that religion is a way of life, but it's one way of me that makes me stop. So I try to say a simple little prayer 3 times a day. Now, sometimes I don't know, am I praying to God? Am I praying to myself? I don't know sometimes, but even that is an act of me giving gratitude. And my prayers can't always be me asking for something. My prayers have to be me saying thank you sometimes. And I developed that habit when I was little because my dad made me do it all the time. He said, say a prayer 3 times a day, even if it's only a minute, and make sure that some of your prayers are thank yous. So I built that habit. And I think with all of these habits, whether it's gratitude or visualization or taking 5 deep breaths, we have to commit to it. We can't just do it sometimes, because your life isn't changed by what you do every now and again. Your life is changed by the little building blocks that you put into your life each and every day.
Lizzie?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. It is, you do have to put work into it. It's not something that you can just flick a switch and you instantly feel gratitude every single day. I suppose for me, it goes back to setting mini goals. And actually, after I did get injured and I decided, no, I need to commit to this, I wrote a list of about 5 or 6 things that I wanted to achieve. And actually, most of them were to do with my mindset and my approach. And one of them is just every time I go on the hockey pitch, just remember why you do it and just try to have fun. And I think when, you get tired, sometimes you get grumpy, you're maybe not training well, or someone's wound you up on the pitch, which always happens, is just coming back to, look, I'm not going to react the way I normally react. I have to work hard at this and just have fun with it, have a laugh, and just try harder. But it's a daily struggle, and it sometimes is helpful to have that visual list of things that you want to achieve. And for me, certainly that's been what I've been focusing on, certainly in the last few weeks.
Great. Well, guys, we're We're just beyond time, but I want to put one more question to you both, and I'm going to borrow this one from Tim Ferriss. Obviously, we had the announcements last night about more restrictions coming into place in the run-up to Christmas. So if each of you could put one message or one piece of advice on a billboard for everyone to see in the run-up to Christmas relating to our respective well-being, what would you put on that billboard? Jerry, maybe yourself first.
Yeah, I would say there's one question for me that is the answer to everything. Is what would love do? If you really loved yourself and you were a loving person, what could you do each and every day to allow yourself to experience love? Because it is the ultimate high performance mindset. It floods your system in a neurotransmitter called oxytocin. It allows you to move beyond anger, move beyond blame. So ask yourself, what do I need in order to become loving? What do I need to let go? What do I need to surrender? And in every situation, ask yourself, if I was loving, if I loved myself, and I trusted in this universe, what would I do today? Then go do that.
Thanks, Jerry. Lizzie, your billboard message?
Yeah, that's a tough one to follow, Jerry. I should have gone first. I suppose just coming back to my message really, and something that I'm doing at the moment is just focus on the things that you can control. We don't know what's going to come around the corner, what announcements are going to be made in the next few weeks, but you know, you can control your mindset, you can control your approach to things, you can control the time that you spend, whether that be with your family, your friends, virtually or in a park, or your dedication to your work. Just don't dwell on things that you have no control over, and just focus on the things that you can. So
yeah, a great way to finish it, and actually very similar to how we started the week. We had a former fighter pilot on who, when she was faced with conflicting priorities when flying a plane where seconds are sort of the matter of life and death, her view was fly the plane, control the controllable, control the most important thing at that point in time. So that's one of the takeaways on the glorious whiteboard behind me. We'll tweet that, and we'll tweet that out through ABC Council and through Podium later on today. And look, it's purely my interpretations from what you guys have said, but judging by the comments that are coming through, people have been really moved and impacted by what you both have shared today. So thank you so much for taking the time. To everyone else, can I remind you to please give a little bit of time yourselves, take 2 minutes to tell us what you thought of today's event. People are already being very kind with their comments, but you can do that formally when you leave this meeting. You will be asked in the webpage to click continue to complete a short survey, and this really does help us shape future events. So thank you once again to ABC Council and their partners for their work in creating this session, and indeed across the whole of Enterprise Week. Thanks to Jerry and to Lizzie, again, superb content, and thanks to everyone for giving of their time to attend. I should say that today's event has also been part funded by the Executive Office, specifically TBUC, and we're going to play you out with a short video from them, together building a united community. So thanks for your time, folks, and take care.
The benefit of good relations is manifold. Firstly, I think it lets our young people come together in an environment that allows them to have fun, but at the same time it has an important point in terms of understanding each other, having mutual respect for each other's identity, and also hopefully forging lifelong friendships. And it also shows this council as a caring and a nurturing area that would take that effort to try and improve community relations and across the piece. And it also allows the council to connect with many voluntary organisations that normally we wouldn't have any dealings with, to ensure that the good relations are built upon across the community.
Good relations is having a positive impact within our borough, where we see community groups from different backgrounds, culturally and socially, working together and supporting one another through our recent crisis of COVID. It's great to see whenever you see young ones, young children that are able to play together and move forward, where traditionally they wouldn't have been doing so. I've seen where the positive impact that's had, where we've seen the skill sets within our communities, where community groups have took on different courses, different classes, and upskilling some of the people within our society, and where that has impacted positively within our community, where we have groups from traditionally opposed factions working together for the good of everyone within their community.